Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
(2021) early team win totals for the Big Ten East. Check. Team win totals for the Big Ten West. Well, that comes up on today's episode of Locked On Big Ten. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Locked On Big Ten, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Tuesday, May 11th, and on today's episode, we go to the Big Ten West Division. Those 7 football programs in set approximated team win totals early on in the month of May, looking ahead to the 2021 college football season. And joining me to do just that is a guy that knows the Big Ten West with the best of them. It is the host of Locked On Hawkeyes, Andrew Wade, back on the podcast. I miss him dearly. It's been too long. Andrew Wade, a pleasure to have you, as it always is.
What's going on, man? I will say this. I do not have the time to be on this show, but I just haven't talked to you in a while. And I felt so bad I couldn't join the draft episode. I love draft too. So I'm like in the middle of moving. I'm starting grad school. I have my new job. I hope you know this is how much I like you that I'm here. And also I like Big Ten West football, so I'm ready to go.
I appreciate you greatly. I think that you probably enjoy speaking about college football in the month of May more than anything about my personality that brings you onto the show. But you're about to start grad school at the University of Iowa, so now a full-blown Hawkeye. You've also had a great run of guests recently on Locked On Hawkeyes. Patrick McCaffrey. What does Gus Johnson call him? PMAC? Patty Mac.
I call him PMAC. Yeah.
I mean, you've been just killing the game right now on Locked On Hawkeyes. So even in this hectic, busy schedule, kudos to you, my friend.
Thank you, man. I mean, honestly, it's easier having guests on than me. Dude, it's a lot easier having guests on, dude. Patrick McCaffrey was awesome. Philip Abracha was truly amazing. Both great guys. Really excited for Iowa basketball. Celia Palermo from WQAD, just absolutely crushing it there. Her couple of years doing the Iowa beat things. So yeah, no, it's been great having so many guests, and we have so many great recruits coming on too. I had an Iowa wrestling recruit yesterday, Brendan Swafford. So man, it's been a lot of fun.
I've only been on Locked On Hawkeyes once, though, if you're keeping count. So regardless, still a great group of guests, and we will go through the Big Ten West today, looking ahead to the 2021 college football season. Andrew Wade and I will set team win totals, give you our perspective on if we think the team is more likely to go over or under that number. We'll debate it all. Again, these are educated guesses, quickly doing a scan through the 2021 schedule as it is on paper right now in the month of May before we get to the fall and everything of the like. And Andrew Wade, of course, this is the Locked On Big Ten podcast. You are a Big Ten guy. But we have now a full slate of the Power 5 podcasts across the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On ACC and Locked On Pac-12 are back in business. Locked On SEC and Locked On Big 12 have been there alongside of you. So the full slate across the college channel in the month of May, getting you ready for the summer and into the fall as we get back for college football season. So let's begin, Andrew Wade, with the Big Ten West. We're going in the 2020 standings order, looking ahead to 2021. So we begin with the Big Ten West champions from 2020, this past season, the Northwestern Wildcats. I set the number, Andrew Wade, looking at the Wildcats 2021 schedule at 6.5. What did you make of that number when I sent that number to you?
Well, considering I sent you my numbers before you sent me your numbers,
I went in with a clean slate, just looking at it through my own lens.
That's fair. I think that's a good call out there. I would go under, but it was tough actually figuring out Northwestern, mostly because every year when you look at the Northwestern Wildcats, you don't know what to make of them. They're a team that they could go 4-8, or they could go 9-3, and neither would surprise me any given year with that team. So it's really tough to make about what to make of that Northwestern football team. I went 6-6 this year, so I'm taking the under on that one. I feel like they lost a few pretty good guys. Obviously, losing Rashawn Slater is going to be huge at that tackle spot. Losing some linebackers, losing Greg Newsom Jr. I mean, that's a big loss to a Northwestern team that really strived by playing good defense. And knowing Northwestern, they're just like an Iowa football team. They're going to be able to rebuild and retool on that defensive side of the ball. But I don't like their schedule very much either. When I look at it, I'm not excited about the Northwestern football team, and I feel like this might be a down year. Not a big down year, but just down year across the board for Northwestern.
It's going to be interesting. Northwestern has been so up and down after being really a model of consistency in the early 2010s the past 3 years, right? They won the Big Ten West in 2018. Then in 2019, they only had 3 wins. Then, of course, bouncing back in 2020 and claiming the Big Ten West division again to head to Indianapolis in the Big Ten title game. I think you will see somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's going to be drastically bad, but I don't think they're going to win the Big Ten West yet again in 2021. You mentioned it, Andrew Wade. A tumultuous offseason as that goes. A new athletic director on campus that has caused a stir. Pat Fitzgerald is still there, a long extension. His offensive coordinator from last year, Mike Bajakian, is still there, but his longtime defensive coordinator, and Mike Hankwitz, is no longer there. So much loss of returning production on the defensive side of the ball. You lose your guys like Patty Fisher and Chris Bergen and some of those guys on the linebacking court. Maybe not Chris Bergen, actually, I think he's back, but Blake Gallagher. You talked about Greg Newsome II. You also lose Peyton Ramsey as your quarterback. Now you're going to transfer market again, getting Ryan Helinski, maybe Hunter Johnson. So a lot of holes to fill for Northwestern, and I think it really comes down to those first 5 games before their bye week, the second week of October, that will decide if they go over or under that 6.5 team win total. It starts with a Big Ten game at home in Evanston against Michigan State, then Indiana State, Duke on the road, Ohio at home, and then Nebraska on the road. Those two play neck and neck each and every year, Nebraska and Northwestern, in what has been a back and forth series. So I think those 5 games decide if they go over or under their team win total. I think they go over. I think Northwestern will be 7-5 next year just because some of the late games in their schedule, I think they are most likely to win against Purdue and against Illinois. So that's what I think pushes Northwestern over, but not by much, by the hook. They go 7 over the 6.5 team win total that we have set. So the next team up is a team that you know very well, Andrew Wade, the team you cover on a daily basis, the Iowa Hawkeyes, of which now you are a grad student. So kudos to you. Here we go. You're soon to be an alum, currently a student. Iowa, I set the team win total for 2021 at 8.5. What did you make of that number?
I went over. I think Iowa's going to go 9-3, which is interesting because when I'm looking at Iowa's schedule, I think there's definitely some opportunities for some losses, right? But I think there's also the first 3 games their schedule, the first 2 games their schedule are going to be freaking brutal, and I think that's going to really be the difference maker for me. You get Indiana at home, and you go on the road to Iowa State. On the road to Iowa State doesn't really bug me from a traditional on-the-road type of game, but Iowa State is going to be a very good team. And I know obviously I'm saying the obvious thing here. They're ranked in the top 10. They returned almost every single starter, but Iowa State is just a phenomenal matchup. Indiana, Iowa State, I think Iowa splits those. But it all comes down to Spencer Petras, and Iowa typically starts out slow. I don't like them playing a Power 5 school back-to-back weeks, especially in Indiana. So you're getting a Big Ten conference game, and then you get your rival in Iowa State. That can make or break a season. They go 2-0 in there, and I think they could run the board. If they go 0-2, oh, buddy, it's going to be an interesting season. And that's what happened this past year. They obviously win 6 games, but it scares me those first 2 games. Now you get past that, you're definitely going 2-2 though. You get Kent State, Colorado State, Maryland. I think you win that game. Penn State, Purdue. You can make a case that they could probably be 5-3 coming out of that, or 5-2, excuse me. But it's going to be a tough schedule, man.
I completely agree. I think those first 2 matchups against Indiana and Iowa State in the first 2 weeks of the year for the Hawkeyes are probably going to be both top 15 matchups by the time we get to the start of the season, at least on paper. Who knows what the rankings will hold up to week number 2, but still, I think on paper, those will be 2 top 15 matchups between Iowa and Indiana and Iowa State. I think if they split those, a great start to the year. If they go 2-0, tremendous. And I would agree with you. That momentum would be very much in their favor, where I think this could be a 10-win season very easily. The toughest test after those first 2 weeks, at home against Penn State the second weekend of October, and then on the road after the bye week to finish off the month of October at Wisconsin. Other than that, those final 4 weeks, I think Iowa's a favorite against Northwestern, Minnesota, Illinois, and Nebraska. And I think they're probably favored against Maryland and Purdue as well. So
Agreed.
I think there's some games in there where Iowa could go 10-2, and I would not be shocked by any means. I think you set the over-under total right now at 8.5, because if you set it at 9.5 to get that over would be very, very tough. However, at 8.5 with the potential of getting 10 wins, I could see that being a realistic possibility for Kirk Ferentz and company in 2021.
I couldn't agree more. The one thing I want to note, though, is, and this is going to be the same thing for every Big Ten team except for Northwestern, because their stadium sucks and their fan support's terrible. And I don't mean to be that mean to Northwestern, but
you can't say those terrible things, mean things, and be like, oh, I don't mean to be that mean. That was very harsh.
Anyone that goes to Northwestern who doesn't realize that is living in a dream. I'm sorry. That is the worst field in the Big Ten. It's an embarrassment to the Big Ten, but Northwestern's a good program. I'll give them that. But Iowa getting Indiana at home, Kinnick is going to be freaking rocking.
Oh my God.
It is going to be lit across the Big Ten. Every first home game is going to be as if it were a rock. If it was AC/DC was performing in front of 300,000 fans, it is going to be wild at every Big Ten stadium. And Iowa getting that home field against Indiana is huge for them to at least get some momentum and possibly allow them to build on to that going into Iowa State.
And that was the game I desperately wanted to see in Big Ten Champions Week, which would have been the 2 versus 2 based on the conference standings last year. We did not get that due to some COVID issues or whatever it may have been to end off the year. But Iowa won 6 straight to end out 2020. Indiana was one of the best teams, obviously, in the Big Ten East as well. So that would have been great. I think it is going to be great to start off the season with that. And you bring up a great point. Kinnick is going to be packed. Those fans were not there last year. All of that enthusiasm from 2019 now boiled over to start off a new football season in early September. Goodness. Maybe I'll make a trip out to Iowa City. Maybe we should make a trip out to Iowa City for that opener.
I'm always down.
Okay.
Oh, I can't. I'll be in Key West, Florida, my man. I can't.
Oh, my God. Big Ten guy, week 1 of the season. He's not even going to be in Big Ten country and or anywhere, just in a resort in Key West. Anyway. That's a little bit disheartening, but we'll get back to that another time. So we move on to the third team, the team that finished number 3 in the Big Ten West standings of 2020, the Wisconsin Badgers, who I think are primed for a bounce-back year in 2021. I set the number at 9.5. Would you go over or under that 9.5 team win total for the Badgers?
Over. I put them at 10 wins, going 10-2. I think their slip-ups could be Notre Dame in Chicago. I think it could be a game, could be a slip-up. I also have Purdue or Northwestern being slip-ups for them. Northwestern constantly gives Wisconsin issues. Northwestern gives a lot of the good teams the Big Ten issues, except for Ohio State, because they just can't match up with them athletically. And then Purdue always steals a game against someone that actually really needs it and actually has a chance of representing the Big Ten well. And it's mostly Iowa. It just pisses me off. And the fact that it's going to be in West Lafayette, that does concern me. And then Iowa, I think, will be a great game. I think they lose 2 of those 4 games. But when I look at the schedule, I mean, could Wisconsin have gotten a better slate of games and draw? Yeah. I mean, they get Penn State in Madison. They get Iowa in Madison. They get Northwestern in Madison. They get Michigan in They have to go to Champaign, Illinois. That's a tough game. Whoa, okay. You get Purdue and Indiana, not that tough. No one's actually worried about Rutgers. I know Rutgers is going to be a solid team, and I actually really like what Greg Schiano is doing, but doesn't concern me from the standpoint. I love what Wisconsin's bringing back. That scares the hell out of me. I mean, it was so fun watching them suck last year and not be as good as Wisconsin normally is, but I know it's just ways like they're going to come back stronger than ever. They return a lot of really good players. Graham Mertz worries the heck out of me. Jalen Berger, I'm glad they didn't use him as much as they should have last year, but they're going to this year. So to me, Wisconsin is going to be a really good program that I'm not looking forward to playing.
Wisconsin has so much returning talent on both sides of the ball. I think they will be back, probably most likely to win the Big Ten West, but I think that matchup with Iowa, what is it, week number 8? Yeah, week number 8. That is going to be what decides the Big Ten West ultimately. I think for the team win total, like you, I would lean over. I think Wisconsin wins 10 games, but let's focus on those first 4 that the Badgers have to start off the year. A Big Ten opener to begin. Penn State at home in Camp Randall. That is going to be as raucous as Indiana and Iowa. Then Eastern Michigan at home. A small bye week early on in the year. And then Notre Dame in the Jack Cohn revenge game, as our guy Ben Kenny would love to call it, in Chicago. And then Michigan at home in Madison as well. If for some reason Wisconsin can start off 4-0 in those first 4 games, I think there's a legitimate chance for Wisconsin to be perfect and unbeaten this year. But that's going to be a lot easier said than done. And then there's always one of those tough tests in the Big Ten Conference late in October, early November that causes any team to have a slip up or a mess up. So I think 9.5 is the right number. Like you, I would go over. I think the number for Wisconsin in 2021 is 10 wins. If they were to get to 11 or even with a incredibly good start to the 2021 campaign and get 12, I would not be shocked. But I do believe Wisconsin more than likely to represent the Big Ten West. But that game against Iowa in week number 8 is going to be incredible because I think both teams will be really good this year, and I think that will decide the Big Ten West division. So next
it comes off a bye. It comes off a bye too. Iowa has a bye before that game, so that's not exactly it's not exactly the great matchup for Wisconsin. So.
And Wisconsin is coming off that game in West Lafayette against Purdue because right now we're saying that could be an upset alert. maybe early on as we're looking at it on paper. If not, it's just going to be a tough test nonetheless in West Lafayette for the Badgers against the Boilermakers. So the next team up, team number 4 out of the 7 in the Big Ten West, the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I have set the number at 5.5. It was a disappointing 2020. I think Minnesota will be better than they were last year. They have a lot of production returning to the Twin Cities as well. But I think the number is right at 5.5. I would love to hear your take, Andrew Wade, on if you think that will be over or under for the Gophers this year.
You say a lot of talent, but you say a lot of people returning, and is it the right people returning? I mean, like,
it's a good question.
I think Mo Ibrahim is phenomenal.
Ibrahim.
I'm so bad with names.
Sorry.
I don't like Tanner Morgan. I just don't see it with him. When he had a phenomenal season that 2 years ago, but he also had, was it Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman? I mean, and yes. Chris Allen-Bell. I mean, he had such a good receiving core there. I mean, I just don't see it with him. And I believe they lost their offensive coordinator after that year, and he struggled a bit this past season. I think when you look at it, if Tanner Morgan can't move the ball consistently down the field, it's very easy to stop the run game when you get into the meat of Big Ten play. So I have Minnesota at 5-7 right now. When I looked at their schedule, they have a tough schedule they have to go up against. Yeah. I'm going to pull it up again. So they go to Ohio State. That's a loss. Easy. Yeah. Miami, they're going to beat Miami. They go to Boulder to play Colorado. I think that could be a loss. Yeah, Colorado's a good team. You beat Bowling Green, fantastic. Then you go on the road to Purdue. I think Purdue can give them some trouble there. You have to play Nebraska. I think, and we're going to talk about this later, I don't hate Nebraska as much as I normally do. Maryland could be a win. Northwestern on the road's tough. Illinois, I think that could be a win. You get Iowa and Iowa City, and then Wisconsin's going to be lost, and you get Indiana and Bloomington. That's just not – that's a terrible stretch of games. You get Iowa, Indiana, Wisconsin, 2 of those on the road. One of those is Wisconsin. You're going to lose that anyways. That's a tough stretch of games for Minnesota this year.
I think as you're about to hear Andrew Wade, the host of Locked On Hawkeyes, and myself discuss, the middle of the Big Ten West that I have all set at 5.5 is really going to be dependent on how these teams do. Minnesota, Purdue, and Nebraska. And we'll dive into it. But I think what you just highlighted there, Andrew Wade, is really going to decide what Minnesota does, if they are going to be bowl eligible in 2021 or if it is going to be under that 5.5. I would lean with you at this moment and go under. I think it's 5 wins for the Gophers. I think they can get 2 of the 4 to start off their season. They're going to lose to Ohio State. I think on the road at Boulder, most likely going to be a loss, but they'll beat Miami of Ohio in Bowling Green, you would think. Then on the road at Purdue, that real 5-game stretch. On the road at Purdue, a bye week. Nebraska, Maryland at home. On the road at Northwestern, at home against Illinois. That's going to make or break how they get to over 5.5 or under 5.5. If they can go 4-1 there, obviously looking to be over, but there's a good chance they could go 1-4 or 2-3. I think all 5 of those games in the stretch of their schedule is going to be toss-ups, really, because the final 3 weeks at Iowa, at Indiana, and home against Wisconsin for the Axe, I think right now Minnesota's probably looking like a touchdown or maybe double-digit favorite or underdog, in each of those games. So I would lean under at the moment of Minnesota's team win total. We set at 5.5. And to talk about their production real quick, offensively, I'm actually not too concerned. The second year under Mike Sanford, I think that Tanner Morgan will be a little bit more adaptive in that system, having the Big Ten running back of the year and Mohamed Ibrahim back with a full offensive line that returns as well, and Chris Ottman-Bell on the outside. I think they have pieces in place. Defense is where I'm concerned. They were abysmal and, I mean, so bad last year in 2020. The good thing about that was it was a lot of young players that maybe weren't expecting to play that gained those lumps in experience, but it's how does that pay off for you? Was it experience they could learn from? Was it teaching lessons? And now can they ramp it up and be reliable Big Ten starters in 2021? That's the question that I think holds Minnesota back, at least to begin. If they got to 7 wins, I would not be shocked. But I think right now, when we set the number at 5.5, I'm going to go under. So 3 more teams left in the Big Ten West. Like I mentioned, setting a lot of team win totals at 5.5. That is the case for the Nebraska Cornhuskers in year number 4 of the Scott Frost era in Lincoln. I have the Huskers at 5.5. You like them to go over, and by not even just the half, by a substantial margin there, Andrew Wade.
It pained me to do that, man. I got to be honest. I was going through I'm sorry, but when we get Fordham, really? That's your schedule?
Week 2 now, yeah.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Okay, tough schedule there. You get 2 buys at the end of later the season. I just like their schedule, man. I think they get some really.
Do you? I think it's so difficult.
Really?
Okay,
I mean, like
so
you're guaranteed to, you're gonna lose to Oklahoma. Yeah, you're gonna lose to Ohio State. Those aren't even demoralizing wins because everyone in Nebraska, like in Cornhusker Nation, is like, yeah, they lost. They're gonna lose those. So you can't even count those as demoralizing losses. They get Iowa in Lincoln. They always play Iowa tough. I think Iowa's a better team, but as an Iowa fan, I can't sit here and say Iowa can comfortably win that game. You never can. I think you beat Illinois to open the season up. If you lose that game, the season's going downhill quick. If you beat Illinois, I think you have a chance. You beat Fordham, you're 2-0. I think you can beat Buffalo. Buffalo is a quality group of 5 team, but you're getting them in Lincoln. Now you lose to Oklahoma, Michigan State. I'm not as high on, but you get Northwestern at Lincoln, you get Michigan at Lincoln, and then Minnesota. So, I mean, you get Purdue at Lincoln. I mean, there's just so many of these games are at Lincoln. I think you lose Wisconsin, you lose Ohio State, you lose Oklahoma, you chalked it up. Those are 3 losses right there. After that, I think Nebraska could or should be favored in all of their games, and it pains me to say that. I don't want
Against
Nebraska
Michigan?
to be good. I don't think Michigan's going to be that good this year.
Okay, so yesterday we had Michigan's team win total for the Big Ten East episode set at 8.5. Would you have gone under that number?
Under.
Okay.
Now that being said, I haven't actually looked at Michigan's. I'm going to say under. Let me go through it real quick. But I'm going to probably say, all right. So the 4. Yeah, I don't like it, man. I mean,
hey, listen, I think under is a fair statement. I had them under as well at 8, but I think they could also win 9. There's so much talent there. The thing I agree with you, having that game in Lincoln is going to be helpful for Nebraska, but that first stretch before they get to that first bye week now, because they have switched the September 4th open date to now have Fordham in there, I think they can easily start 3-0. But like you mentioned, Buffalo is a really good MAC team. The game against Oklahoma, I would chalk that up to a loss, although I don't think Nebraska fans are just saying that because of the old Big 8 rivalry ties there. I think Michigan State is going to be improved. Well, not the first Big Ten game for them, but in East Lansing is going to be difficult. Northwestern's a toss-up. Michigan's a toss-up. I'd probably have them favored over Nebraska or over Minnesota. They haven't beat Purdue since Scott Frost has been there, so that's something to keep in mind as well. And Wisconsin and Iowa. See, I think they go over as well. I think they will get to a bowl game this year with 6 wins. But to get 7 would be a little bit tough for me. And I think 5.5, just based on the schedule as it stands on paper right now on May 11th, makes the 5.5 seem more realistic in my mind.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, when I look at their first 5 games, that's really what it comes down to. I think you can kind of look through the rest and kind of get a pretty good feel what's going to happen. But worst case scenario, they could go 1-4 in their first 5 games. And that takes this whole thing out. And I think Scott Frost is on the chopping block and should be fired at that point if they go 1-4. But I also think that they could go 4-1 with Oklahoma being that loss. I don't think it's unrealistic to say that. So that's how big of a variance it is. Now, the reports coming out of Lincoln, I do follow Nebraska pretty closely. My best friend, loves Nebraska. They're always positive. They're always super freaking positive, and then bad things happen pretty quickly. But supposedly the wide receiver group's coming along pretty strong. Oliver Martin, Iowa fans are very familiar with him. So are Michigan fans. He's been on half the Big Ten teams at this point. But it seems like he's actually getting it now and going to be able to be a very productive player for Nebraska. If Adrian Martinez can be a quality quarterback who can throw accurate, that's a funny statement. But if he can do that, that would be phenomenal for Nebraska, and I think they can get going. They do some nice things.
Listen, it's a very young roster with not a ton of experience. They've had a lot of people transfer out. They've lost a lot of the recruits they had in 2018 and 2019. It's going to be interesting. And like you mentioned, I don't think Scott Frost should be on the hot seat. I have said all along from my days covering Nebraska when I was working in Omaha, when he was hired in December of 2018, if Scott Frost is not the guy to turn around Nebraska's football program, I don't know whoever is going to do it. Truly, I do not.
Perfect.
So I don't think he should be on the hot seat. However, I understand that we're growing a little bit tired of all the positive talk and not seeing the results. I get all of that. I think Nebraska, a key this year would be to become bowl eligible. If they can get 6 wins, I think that is going to be huge for Nebraska. And I'm not knocking them in the potential, but I think that's a step in the right direction. So I think they go over by the hook and they get 6 wins of the 5.5 team win total we selected. So the next team up in the Big Ten West, like I mentioned, the meat of the middle of that conference, another team at 5.5, the Purdue Boilermakers, who Jeff Brom also has some people questioning if he's the coach in West Lafayette for the long term as well. What do you think of Purdue's number this year? Do you think they go over or under that 5.5?
I think they go over. I think they get at least 6 wins. I mean, they have one of, if not the best wide receiver in the Big Ten. I know Chris Olave is back, but David Bell is, if you haven't watched Purdue football, and I know a lot of people probably don't intentionally watch Purdue football, I get it, but David Bell is just such a good wide receiver. You got two quarterbacks with experience in Big Ten play. Now, I know they've struggled the last 2 years, 2-4 last year, 4-8 the year before that, but Jeff Brom always has his team competitive and in contention. I mean, they looked pretty good against a quality Iowa football team last year. Now, I think Iowa should have won, but they are able to do some things offensively that tricks even one of the best defenses in the entire nation. So it's a matter of being consistent. They beat a good team one week and they fall to a crappy team the next week. I think we're going to see that pattern continue this year, but I do think they at least get 6 wins. And Purdue's a tough place to win at. I give Jeff Brom some credit. I mean, it's tough to win at Purdue, and he's recruiting some high-quality talent. Rondell Moore, David Bell, I mean, you convinced 2 4-star wide receivers to come there and actually produce. That's impressive.
Yeah. I agree with you. Listen, I think it will really come down to that first stretch of the 5 games prior to their first bye week. To have Oregon State, UConn on the road, but that's one of the worst teams in all of college football. Notre Dame on the road, maybe that's at Lambeau. I got whatever. Not a big deal. But the games against Oregon State, UConn, Notre Dame, Illinois, and Minnesota before the bye week. If Purdue starts 4-1, I think they go over. And I think it's likely they start 4-1. But then it really comes down to the games, 4 of their final 5 games. On the road at Nebraska, Michigan State at home. Then the game I don't think they have a chance in on the road at Ohio State. But again, we have seen them do some crazy things against Ohio State. And then on the road at Northwestern and Indiana. So those 4 games, Nebraska, Michigan State, Northwestern, and Indiana, 2 of them on the road, 2 of them at home. If Purdue can split those, then I think they will be bowl eligible and go over the 5.5 team win total we've selected. If they do not, I think it's likely they can win 4 or 5 games and go under. I think it's that first stretch of 5 games and then 4 of the 5 to end the regular season for the Purdue Boilermakers. I hope they get to bowl eligibility. I think it's going to be a little bit tough sledding, and a couple of games that are really up in the air will decide the outcome. So, Andrew Wade, 6 of the 7 teams in the Big Ten West we have gone through. The last one up, the Illinois Fighting Illini, the only team in the Big Ten Conference this year in both divisions that has a new head coach, that being Brett Bielema. Burt back in Champaign. I have their team win total set at 3.5. And I know the number might be a little bit jarring to people seeing 3.5 next to Illinois, but I think it's fair right now in year number 1 of a new regime.
Yeah, it is. But I actually have Illinois winning 5 games. That was tough for me to do. When I look at their schedule, I mean, so they have Nebraska in Illinois. I think Nebraska wins it, but I think the fact they are in Illinois, Brett Bielema is going to be good there. You get the UTSA Roadrunners in Champaign. That should be a win. Charlotte 49ers, that should be a win. So you're guaranteed you got 2 wins right there, right?
Right.
If you have the 3.5, you need just 2 more wins. You get Rutgers in Illinois. That could be a possible win. I think Maryland in Illinois could be a possible win. You could take Virginia to be. I mean, there are opportunities on the schedule to get W's. I do agree. Breaking in a new coach is going to be tough. At least they're going to have they had a spring practice. They're able to have a summer practice. That's better than what Michigan State got last year. But I do think Illinois can top 3.5 wins. I think they'll get 5. Brett Bielema is a good coach. I mean, he struggled a little bit after leaving Wisconsin, but he brought Wisconsin or helped keep Wisconsin at those heights that they were at, and that tradition has been carried on from then. Winning in Illinois is tough, though. Now, they have Brandon Peters back. That's good. You have a quality starting quarterback who I actually have been very impressed with. He struggled last year, but I was really impressed with him 2 years ago. I actually had Illinois. I thought Illinois was a sleeper pick to win a bunch of games last year in the Big Ten West. They disappointed me, and Lovie Smith gets fired. But long story short, that's my way of saying I think Illinois will beat their very low expectations, but it is going to be a rebuilding time down in Champaign.
I think Illinois goes over the 3.5 total I have set as well. I think they go 4. I could see a case for 5. I think those games that you mentioned that are going to be toss-ups, Maryland at home, Rutgers at home, the 2 crossover games of the Big Ten East, having those in Champaign, I think is a benefit. You might have some games of the Big Ten West on the road at Purdue, on the road at Minnesota. Maybe you can get that. They've struggled tremendously in the Land of Lincoln Trophy against Northwestern in Pat Fitzgerald's tenure in Evanston, so I don't really think that one's in their favor. I think Nebraska probably gets them to open up the year on the road at UVA in an ACC Big Ten showdown. I think that's going to be a little tough as well. So I think 4 is a number that they could hit. I could see 5. I would go over of the 3.5, but I think it's going to be more so about the progress you see made based on the wins in the win column. And I know that's kind of a caveat, maybe a cheap way out in your first year as a head coach, but I think Brett is the right guy to do it. I think Burt will be there doing some good stuff for that Illinois Fighting Illini football program. So, Andrew Wade, the Big Ten West Division is now done. All 7 programs, we have set their team win totals. I had a good time doing it. Anytime you can talk football, actual football, looking ahead to 2021, even if it's just guesstimating what team win totals will be based on looking at the schedule briefly, it's a fun time. And when I get to do it with a good friend like you, Andrew Wade, the host of Locked On Hawkeyes, it's a great time. So thank you for being here today.
Absolutely, man. Love being here. Like I said, I chose to be here despite the fact that I'm trying to move a house. So absolutely, man. Always a pleasure coming on. Always a pleasure talking football and looking forward to doing it more.